It's 4:12 a.m., April 17th, 2026, in the Strait of Hormuz, and one tanker is still moving. Everything else has stopped, but the ship keeps pushing forward into restricted waters like nothing changed. From above, the strait looks frozen. Thousands of vessels packed into a narrow 6-mile corridor, engines idle, waiting for something to happen. The tanker doesn't slow down, doesn't turn, doesn't react. It just keeps going. The water ahead looks calm at first, almost empty, but then a thin wake cuts across the surface, fast and low, slipping between two cargo ships before disappearing. A few seconds later, another one appears, then more. The pattern forms quickly. Small boats begin moving through the gaps, spreading out, positioning themselves between larger ships, like they already know exactly where to go. It doesn't look random, it looks planned. Within seconds, the stillness breaks. The water fills with movement as wakes cross in different directions, tightening around the tanker, and then it happens. A flash streaks across the surface, low and fast, closing the distance before anyone can react. The missile hits hard, tearing through the tanker's side as a fireball rises into the sky. The explosion rolls across the water, pushing heat and smoke into the air as nearby ships begin to move. Engines power up, crews react, confusion spreads, and just like that, the entire strait shifts from silent to unstable. The explosion doesn't stop anything, it triggers everything. Flames climb higher from the tanker as thick smoke begins to spread across the strait, and within seconds, movement starts building around it. Ships that were sitting still begin to shift position, slowly at first, then faster as the danger becomes clear. The narrow corridor starts tightening instead of opening. The water fills with motion as more wakes appear, not random, but controlled, moving between ships, cutting through gaps, closing space. The boats are everywhere now, small, fast, and hard to track, using the larger vessels as cover, disappearing behind hulls and reappearing somewhere else seconds later. The entire area turns into a maze of moving targets. What makes it worse is how close everything is. There's no open water here, no safe distance, just ships packed tightly together with barely any room to maneuver. Every movement creates risk, every second adds pressure. The boats don't need to hit everything, they just need to stay in motion, keep spreading, keep forcing reactions. That's what shuts the strait down. Not one strike, but constant pressure from multiple directions. And the longer it continues, the harder it becomes to respond. Because now it's not just about stopping an attack. It's about controlling a space that's already slipping out of control. The problem builds fast, and it starts to show. The boats don't slow down, they adjust. Some break away and circle back. Others push deeper between ships, tightening their positions. The water becomes unpredictable, movement coming from every direction at once. What looked manageable just moments ago starts to overwhelm the space. Ships try to create distance, but there's nowhere to go. Every turn risks collision. Every delay makes things worse. The boats use that hesitation, slipping through blind spots, hugging the sides of larger vessels, disappearing just long enough to avoid being tracked, then reappearing closer than before. It turns into a timing problem. By the time one movement is noticed, another is already happening somewhere else. The pattern keeps repeating, spreading pressure across the entire corridor. The burning tanker drifts in the middle of it all, still exposed, still pulling attention, but no longer the only problem. Now the entire strait is shifting. Movement builds in layers, boats crossing paths, tightening gaps, forcing reactions from every direction. Nothing is leading anymore, everything is reacting. And that's where control starts to break down, because this isn't about one strike or one target, it's about numbers and constant pressure. The boats don't need to win directly, they just need to stay active long enough to overwhelm everything around them. And with every second that passes, that pressure grows stronger. The pressure keeps building and the limits start to show. The space is too tight, the targets too many, and the movement too fast to fully track. Every second adds another layer of complexity. Boats cut across the corridor, forcing ships to adjust, forcing hesitation, forcing mistakes. The system starts reacting instead of controlling. And that's the shift that matters, because once control turns into reaction, everything slows down. Decisions take longer. Movement becomes cautious. And that's exactly what the boats are exploiting. They don't stay in one place long enough to be targeted cleanly. They move, pause, reposition, then move again, constantly changing angles, constantly forcing attention to shift. From above, the pattern becomes clear. It's not about attacking everything. It's about staying present everywhere, keeping the pressure spread across the entire strait. That's what locks it down. Not destruction, but disruption. The kind that builds over time until nothing can move without risk. The ships below are no longer navigating freely. They're reacting to what's around them. And that changes everything, because now the advantage isn't with size or firepower, it's with speed and positioning. And right now, the boats have both. The longer they stay active, the more control slips away, and the harder it becomes to take it back. The shift doesn't happen all at once, but it starts to become visible. Instead of chasing movement, the focus turns to staying over it. Presence replaces reaction. Aircraft begin holding position longer, flying lower, watching the surface in real time instead of cycling in and out. From that angle, the pattern changes. The boats are easier to spot, their paths clearer, their intent easier to read. They're not invisible anymore, they're exposed. Movement that once looked random now shows structure. Boats grouping, splitting, repositioning, trying to rebuild pressure. But this time they're being watched before they fully form, and that changes the timing. Engagement happens earlier, faster, before the swarm tightens. The advantage starts to shift. The boats still move fast, still use the same tactics, but they can't stay hidden long enough to control the space. Every time they spread out, they're met with response. Every time they push forward, they're disrupted. The pattern that once built pressure now starts to break under it. From above, it becomes a cycle. Movement, detection, engagement, reset, over and over again. And with each cycle, the space opens slightly more. Ships begin to move again, cautiously at first, then with more confidence. The corridor starts to breathe. It's not clear yet, but it's no longer locked. The control that slipped away earlier is starting to return, piece by piece, not through one decisive action, but through constant presence and steady pressure in the opposite direction. The balance finally starts to turn. What was once constant pressure begins to break apart in pieces. The boats don't move the same way anymore. They hesitate. They spread out wider, trying to avoid being seen, trying to avoid being engaged early. But that change works against them. The tighter coordination that once gave them control starts to disappear. Gaps open between movements, timing slips, and those small breaks make a difference. Each time they try to regroup, they're disrupted before the pattern fully forms. The rhythm is gone. From above, the corridor looks different now. Ships are moving again, slowly but steadily, creating space where there was none before. The chaos doesn't disappear, but it loses its edge. It becomes manageable. The boats are still there, still active, but no longer in control of the situation. They react now, instead of dictating movement. And that shift spreads quickly. The longer it holds, the harder it is to reverse. The pressure that once shut the strait down starts to fade, replaced by controlled movement and growing stability. It's not a clean transition, and it's not immediate, but it's happening. The system is recovering, not because the threat is gone, but because it's no longer dominating the space. And in a place this tight, this crowded, that difference is everything. By the time the sun starts to rise, the strait looks different again. Not calm, not completely safe, but moving. Ships are no longer frozen in place. They're spreading out, finding lanes, building distance where there was none before. The fires from earlier are fading, smoke drifting off as the damaged tanker slows under control. The chaos hasn't disappeared, but it's no longer driving everything. What changed wasn't the scale of force, it was how it was applied. The pressure that once came from every direction is now being pushed back, piece by piece, replaced with steady presence and controlled movement. The boats are still out there, but they're no longer shaping the space. They react now. They hesitate. And that hesitation is enough. Because in a corridor, this narrow, control isn't about destroying everything in sight. It's about keeping things moving, keeping space open, keeping pressure from building again. The strait doesn't reset all at once. It stabilizes gradually, each movement building on the last. And as that happens, the bigger picture becomes clear. This was never about a single strike or a single target. It was about control of space and how quickly it can be taken and how difficult it is to take back. By the end of it, the lesson is simple. The advantage doesn't always belong to the biggest force. It belongs to the one that adapts first and holds that edge long enough to change the outcome.